violence and abuse that happens online. And we strive to create more inclusive and safe spaces, both online and offline. We do that through multiple things: advocacy, pro bono legal and psychological support, legislative reforms, awareness campaigns. We provide online safe spaces for victims and survivors. We have anti-harassment booths at events and concerts. We do research and data analysis. We have the Speak Up Academy, through which we provide workshops, trainings, and internships. Our Safe and Loud podcast serves as a kind of manual for women on SRHR content as well as the legal information. And our current highlight and pride is the Speak Up helpline. It's a tool that is dedicated to supporting victims of online violence through rapid harmful content removal through our partnerships with major platforms such as Meta, TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat, Pinterest, and ILO, which includes Pornhub as well as other assisted companies. You can find the helpline on our website, speakupeg.com/helpline, or by scanning the huge QR code. So we receive a wide variety of reports on the helpline, from defamation, blackmail, both child and adult sexual exploitation, and we also receive cases regarding the unfair removal of SRHR content and awareness content. So we have a research paper on the reality of cyberbullying and blackmail crimes in Egypt. And actually, the Speak Up helpline was kind of the solution that we found after conducting this research, because we saw how many gaps there are, especially legal gaps, and there's such little support for victims. So Speak Up helpline was the thing that we came up with. And the research paper was actually started because of two devastating cases where two minors were blackmailed with intimate content of them. One of them was actually fake, and they ended up taking their lives. So, back to our session today. So it's from blackmail to censorship, rethinking women's digital rights. I'll be talking a lot more about the blackmail section of it, and then I'll hand it over to Gillian to discuss the censorship part. So across the SWANA region, people are facing increasing online threats, especially women. In Egypt, one of the main issues is blackmail and extortion, which is often intertwined with gender-based violence, societal stigma, and legal gaps. And then on the other side, content is being censored online. So those two issues are really connected, because when the awareness content or information is censored, victims often find themselves isolated. And when victims' voices are silenced, then perpetrators act with more impunity. So we conducted a questionnaire to see how widespread this issue is, and we received over 3,000 responses, 90% of which were women, and the ages range from 7 to 60 years old. The majority were young women or university students between the ages of 18 to 25. And actually, this is the same age group that makes up the majority of the reports we receive on the helpline. And those are not isolated online incidents. It's a very systemic and gendered form of abuse, control, and power, and an intersection between gender, technology, and fear. So whenever we talk about online violence, the two most popular questions we get is, why don't they just report it? And the second is, perhaps for people more familiar with our context, is about a specific law, Law 175 from the year 2018. And let me mention here that while the specific law I'm going to talk about is specific to Egypt, but when we had one of our workshops with 25 judges from 3 different countries in the region, we really realized how connected all of it is and how similar the challenges are in the entire region.
Excuse me, can you please use the mic just so that we can interpret for the gentleman?
Yeah, no worries. I think we just couldn't turn it on.
Oh, you couldn't turn it on?
No, I think maybe, so the mic is just for the booth?
I don't know. Oh, okay, it's on. Perfect.
Thank you.
For those who are not familiar with this specific law, Law 175 for the year 2018 is the Information Technology Crimes and Cybersecurity Law. So, where's the issue? Well, vague wording, unclear descriptions, and contradictions. Let me give you two quick examples. Extortion in this law, it does not exist. It's only mentioned under the Penal Code under Article 327. and it mentions verbal and written acts, verbal or written threats for money. So basically, most online cases simply do not fit. And the second thing, Article 25 of the Law 175 states that it prohibits invasion of privacy and infringement of family values. Sounds a bit protective, no? But in practice, the very term Egyptian family values is actually used inaccurately against victims, especially women, online. This specific term is what's currently being weaponized to arrest and punish female influencers and TikTokers who are supposedly violating society and family values. Here I would like to ask you a question, and that's how many people here know the process for reporting any form of online violence in your own country? Okay, so the lack of raised hands is also why we needed to discuss this topic. So for the second question, it's like, why don't they report it? So the top reason was lack of awareness of the process, followed by fear of parents and doubt in any positive results, as well as fear of society and lack of financial capacity, among other reasons, but those were the top 5. So even when they do report, the numbers speak volumes. Only 10% of the victims actually end up reporting or filing an official report. So we can visualize it here. Say we have 100 women, and only 10% of them actually report. So we're left with 10 women, and for each woman we have 1 perpetrator. So of those 10%, 40% of the cases get shelved with no further action. So that leaves us with only 60%. And of those 60%, and maybe 12% actually get arrested. I mean, that's not even a full person anymore, it's 0.72, I couldn't find an outcome for that. And that's without even mentioning punishment. I mean, only 35% get a sentence, 0.252. We don't have a human anymore, so basically we only have the perpetrator's shoelaces at most at the end of the statistics. But all jokes aside though, this shows the deep disconnection. But that's really funny because when I said disconnection, okay, it shows the deep disconnection between the text of the law, how it's applied, and the actual access to justice. And this huge gap between what's written and what's lived is where justice just collapses. But the problem is not only the law, it's also in institutions and in the culture around it. So one of the major barriers when it comes to culture is societal stigma, victim blaming, the fear of scandal. In many cases, the families end up being complicit in the abuse by silencing the daughters out of fear for tarnishing the family's honor. And when it comes to systems or institutions, a quick example is for victims under 15 years old, for example, they cannot report without a legal guardian, which in itself becomes the very reason they avoid reporting. That is not to mention the cases where that very guardian might even be the abuser. And there's almost always just one reporting center in each governorate, which is very crowded, which leads us to the next point, which is lack of privacy, and the victim has to recount her experience in detail in front of all of those strangers. And cybercrimes units usually have only male officers who are not equipped with dealing with online violence sensitively. Not to mention that investigations do not run 24/7, leaving more than enough time for perpetrators to get rid of evidence. So, as I mentioned, the Speak Up helpline came about or was born after this research paper and after we saw how many gaps there are, as a rapid harmful content removal tool and providing direct support to the victims. Also connecting them with psychological and legal support if they need it. And I would like to share a few of the cases that we received on our helpline. So the first one is from Egypt. It was an account impersonating a minor and posted explicit images of her exposing her body with just a mere emojis almost covering nothing. And then this had been going on for over a month. And the account then threatened her that they would reach out to family members and falsely claim that she was offering sexual services. So after the helpline intervention, Meta removed this account within 18 hours, stopping abuse that has been going on for a whole month. And the next case is also from Egypt. So a man decided to create a fake Facebook account to publish private photos of his ex-wife, and this is sadly a very common tactic when it comes to divorce in Egypt, and I'm assuming probably the rest of the region, where the man tries to shame or publicly humiliate the woman in an attempt to isolate her kids, probably to get her to give up some form of right, be it assets, custody, or whatever. And this account was removed within 1 hour over escalation, stopping the abuse and the psychological harm to both the woman and the child, because he used this account to contact his 13-year-old child's friends. So, I have no words, honestly. The next case is from Libya. A Libyan woman's photos were used on TikTok with false claims she was involved in prostitution and spreading sexual diseases. And this has been going on for like 3 to 4 months. And then it escalated to AI altered videos, which put her at extreme risk. And there were multiple accounts, and all of them were removed within 2 hours of the helpline's escalation. And the final case is from Iraq, where a feminist activist, her photos were also stolen, and a prostitution profile was created on Facebook, putting her at severe risk, especially as a well-known person. You know, when activists, usually those people are known. And in the region, such accusations can very easily lead to death. And the account was removed within 24 hours, potentially saving her life. What those cases show is that tiny intervention could really make the difference between life and death. And digital safety is not a luxury, it's a necessity and a right. And it's really important to highlight that. We need clear laws that explicitly state the violations and the punishments, increased penalties for when the abuse leads to devastating consequences such as suicide, judicial cooperation, because in many cases the blackmailers are actually operating from a different country and there's no way to reach them. And we need platform accountability. Platforms need to act faster and smarter with policies rooted in the local realities and risks. In our region, in many cases, online violence does not stay online. It often translates to real-world harm, blackmail, harassment. Sorry, I lost my train of thoughts. Sorry. Honor-based violence, as well as even death. So, in places where there is no legal protection, online safety is a lifeline. We've seen far too often what happens when help arrives too late. For many people, way too much than is supposed to be. Their voices are only heard after something terrible has already happened. We need systems that make space for their voices before the crisis. Systems that recognize their suffering, not just their loss. And with that, I would say that many of the reports we do receive are regarding sexual exploitation, harassment, blackmail, and so on. But we also receive a number of reports regarding the unfair removal of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and even includes things like as simple as menstrual pain or the self-check for breast cancer. And that takes us to the second face of this coin, which is censorship and erasure, and I'll let Gillian talk to us more about that. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I can come, as you like. Hi, so that was amazing, and one of the things that struck me as we've been talking over the past few weeks is like all of these cultural and legal contexts are different, but some of these examples are reflective of things that I've seen in the US in terms of abuse online. A lot of the reporting in different countries, of course, varies, and the access to legal recourse differs, but nevertheless, like I think that, you know, it's obvious to me that women and people identifying as other genders experience a lot of the same things no matter where we're talking about, just maybe on a different scale at times. But on this topic specifically, I'm just going to be talking about reproductive justice, but just to give some background, I've also worked on platform accountability and specifically platform censorship, or as I would call it, or wrongful takedowns of content for many years. And as the example that Salma just said, some of the things that got me interested in this were things being taken down around breast cancer awareness, around even things as simple as like advertisements for bras, things like information about menstruation and other reproductive health and all of these things. But this topic specifically, so EFF got heavily involved in this topic a few years ago when in the United States, Roe versus Wade was overturned. That was the law that allowed abortion in all 50 states. And following that, as you probably mostly know, but I'll just make sure everyone's on the same page, a number of different states have abolished abortion to different degrees. Nevertheless, in the US, mifepristone, the abortion pill, is widely available and is often shipped across state lines regardless of legality. I'm not an expert on the different laws, although my legal colleagues at EFF are, and we have a lot of resources on that. But this presentation is specifically about the way that platforms are dealing with information being shared mostly about abortion, but also about other reproductive health issues. Do I just, thank you.
Don't touch the black cable.
Okay.
It doesn't like being touched.
There we go. So I want to just start with a few examples, and then I'll talk about the research that we're doing. And I'll say, just to start, this research was not limited to the United States. We actually put out an ask to get information from people all over the world who had experienced different types of censorship related to reproductive health. And we did get examples from a number of different countries. I mostly didn't include them in the slides because I put these together at the last minute, as one does. But I am very interested in other people who are working on this and getting more examples from the region, where unfortunately we actually didn't get very many from here. We did get them from interesting places elsewhere, but I'm happy to share that information for anyone who's interested. And I also have some handouts at the end of this. So this is an example where we had a health policy strategist. This is a person with degrees in the field of health, who had discussed abortion pills availability via mail. And I'll just read a short piece of this for the translation. She basically just said, abortion pills, naming them, are great to have around, whether you anticipate needing them or not. Plan C Pills, which is a website that offers them for purchase, and in some cases I believe for free, is an amazing resource to help you find reliable sources for abortion pills by mail, no matter where you live. And then it goes on to explain how the pills should be kept at home. So she discussed abortion pills availability via mail. She provided simply factual information about the two medicines which are both approved by the Food and Drug Administration in the US. But despite not actually violating any of Meta's policies, her post was removed. So there's been a lot of research done on Meta's policies specifically. And our project actually did look at several platforms, but I will say that the majority of examples that we got were about this behemoth that we know as Meta. So prior to our research, Human Rights Watch, and I believe Amnesty and a couple of other organizations had actually spoken to people at Meta. And in February 2024, Amnesty, that's right, the letter to Amnesty International, the Human Rights Policy Director, who some of you know, Miranda Sissons, wrote that organic content, that is non-paid content, educating users about medication for abortion is allowed and does not violate our community standards. So very clear line on what the rules are, and it has since been updated within the community standards to reflect that specificity. She also said that providing guidance on legal access to pharmaceuticals is allowed. So the rules are clear, the information has been published, and yet between 2024 and when we published our report a few months ago, we received probably around 50 to 70 examples, and the other organizations that I've talked to that are collecting these types of examples, we're getting similar numbers or even more on regarding Meta. Slide, there we go. In another example, this one really kind of blew my mind. This was a woman called Samantha Shoemaker, who's also an individual advocate. She did a similar thing, sharing straightforward facts about accessing abortion pills. Similar things to the previous example, where she shared images and links to Plan C's website, and a short clip of women talking about their experiences taking abortion pills. Again, all within the rules that Meta said are allowed. But in this case, in multiple instances, her content was not only removed, but it was removed under the community standard on dangerous organizations and individuals. That is the one that's usually used for people who are accused or involved in terrorism or violent extremism globally. So this just kept happening to her, and she reached out to us. And in her case, we were initially able to get her profile put back online, but it has since happened multiple times, and we can't seem to get a permanent fix in her instance. And of course, they won't tell us why that's happening. But to be clear, I have seen all of the content in this example, and none of it had anything to do with violent extremism. So this remains a mystery as to why this happened. So over and over again, oh, no, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. There we go. Over and over again, the policies from Meta and from other companies say one thing, but the actual enforcement says another. And I know that many of you are probably already familiar with that. So I just want to ask a quick question, especially because I know it's near the end of the day. Please raise your hand if you've experienced any kind of what you would say wrongful takedown or censorship on a platform. Okay, and keep your hand up if it was related in some way to gender. Okay, so that's a lot, and I imagine if I asked the whole conference, we would get similar numbers. And of course, I mean, the impact of this varies, right? Sometimes, you know, if you're sharing something silly and it gets taken down, as I have, this has happened to me, not a big impact. But when you're sharing something related to reproductive health, which, as everyone knows, is often a very time-based need, the impact is severe. To have this information removed, you know, this does affect people's individual lives, and so these companies are not acting with accountability or, sorry, I'm losing the word that I'm looking for, I guess justice, but that's still not the right word, but they're not acting with any form of accountability, and we know that they're not adhering to their own sets of standards. I will note that in addition to Meta, we've seen similar issues on TikTok, YouTube, and other lesser-known platforms. We've not seen these sorts of issues yet on Blue Sky, but I imagine that with the change in their rules that's recently happened, that's probably coming. And so just to go back to something that Selma said, and I know we're nearing the end of time probably, one thing that we've noted, and I think everyone's pretty familiar with this, if you don't have a personal or second-degree connection to Meta or really to any of these companies, your chances of getting your content restored or your account restored are likely to drop significantly. And this is why these helplines that run by Speak Up, run by Access Now, run by a bunch of SMEX, a bunch of other organizations that are here and in our community are so important. Of course, a lot of them are working more forwardly on frontline issues such as taking down, taking down abusive content, but many of them are also equipped to help in instances like this, and of course they can share more information with you on that. Finally, I just want to note, and this is in the one pager I'm giving out too, so I'll pass by this quickly, but there are a few things that you can do to prevent or to try to prevent this type of censorship. We think the images and keywords that you use matter, being very clear in your posts beats vagueness, being careful with links, so ensuring that you're not linking to things that are known to have been removed on these platforms, and a lot of times they'll give you a warning, certain word combos are red flags, and then of course the rules for ads are even stricter, and in the case of pharmaceuticals, pharmaceutical advertisers have to prove that they're licensed in the countries that they target. And then finally, just a link to the project, which is eff.org/pages/stop-censoring-abortion. Again, it'll be in the papers that I'm giving out. And I will end there and pass it back to you, or can I, yeah, please.
I'll just add one thing, is that the Speak Up helpline also assists with the restoration of unfairly taken down content. We've actually received reports from within the region, but also from the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada as well. So if anyone is facing such issue, feel free to reach out. We also have brochures and like business cards, so we're gonna hand those out as well. So you can scan the QR code. We found out that's like the easiest way to. We also have stickers, so please take some stickers. And I guess now, like, if someone has any questions for either of us, we can, yeah.
Oh yeah, let's pass around the mic for the transition.
My question is for Speak Up. I know how important it is to remove the accounts that are harming or exploiting women, especially in the part of blackmailing. But I'm just wondering if this is effective, because usually those accounts are fake and they can just create another one, and how many times like you usually try to like create remove like ask Meta to remove those accounts, because like that's happened to me and they wouldn't stop creating new accounts.
Of course, removing content is not a very perfect solution, because, as you said, people can keep creating accounts, and we do not have a way to stop them from that without legal action. So the helpline is basically trying to bridge the gap, because usually, as I mentioned, most of these online threats or abuse could lead to the person's death. It's too severe that sometimes first taking down the content is more important than doing anything else. So that's why like providing the rapid harmful content removal is really essential. But like for what you mentioned, there's like, sadly, only a legal pathway would end up in arresting the perpetrator would completely stop the abuse. So as I mentioned, like the helpline is merely trying to bridge the gap in the best way that we could. Thankfully, in many cases, we only get a report from one person like just once, but we actually have like certain people that were like, oh, I know this person, because we start like mentally having the list of the like repeated victims, sadly, because sometimes somebody has some kind of abuser that's targeting them relentlessly, and then until they're either arrested or get bored, we just keep taking down the content as much as we could. I hope that answers the question. Anybody?
So, thank you. I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about the post-reporting process under the Cybersecurity Law 175/2018. Specifically, what happens after the reporting the station and during the judicial process? Is it up to the discretion of the judge to get that 0.25% conviction rate? And is there any work that you're doing to kind of for like judicial activism on a regional thing to educate judges on this issue? And I guess secondly, I was curious also if Egypt government or even provincial governments are able to issue takedown notices after a successful prosecution, and if there's any kind of reporting directly from the government to Meta and other companies to kind of streamline that process.
Sorry, I'll probably have to say them again, but I can take them over.
After the person goes to the station to report the incident, the cyber harassment or exploitation, from that office does it go? These offices go to a judge within.
If they deem that there is enough evidence, yeah.
And does that judge, is it up to the discretion of the judge to decide whether the case is.
As any other case, like depending on the evidence that's provided and so on, it's up to the judge to decide whether this is something that requires punishment or not. But like a lot of things, according to what's written in the law, should be violating and the person should be punished. But as I mentioned, like the stats that we're talking about is like for only the 10% that actually report. So there's like big numbers that nobody even knows about because of people who don't even come forward about it. And the second question was?
If the government of Egypt is able to issue takedown notices following a successful prosecution?
Honestly, not that we're aware of, but generally, for example, sometimes we get reports where someone has already filed a report, and then after some point, the officers don't need the online content anymore. They like gathered the evidence and the information that they need. So then they come to us and they're like, the officer said it's okay, so can you please take this down because it's like ruining my life. So that's usually what happens. Honestly, we are not sure, not to our knowledge, that the government really gets involved in the content takedown. Does anybody else have any questions?
Thank you. Maybe following up with the previous question a little bit, you kind of put here on the case examples of like Egypt and Iraq and so forth. Apparently, like the platforms, like how long does it take usually for them to remove these contents? Just to like, because it seems that, well, for example, I work in like I work in human smuggling and human smuggling advertisements on TikTok and how they like, how long it takes for like these platforms to like take some of the content down. Of course, it's like much more, you know, like under the, like it's very discreet how they advertise these services. But yeah, I'm just interested in knowing like how long does it take for them to like, you know, take action, and do they take it like seriously in this case?
So one of the best thing about having the trusted partner status is that the reporting channel that we use is different from the like MCQ reporting that normal users could use. We have the opportunity to add context. So for how long it takes to, because this is the first question we get after we submit any report and like contact the person that submitted your report, oh, so how long is it going to take to be taken down? So honestly, it varies from one platform to another, from one case to another on the same platform. Some cases could take 10 to 15 minutes, others could take a month. So honestly, there is no like standard answer for it. It really depends on the platform and on the case itself. But I guess we would say that honestly, we felt the most responsiveness from TikTok. They're a lot faster to take down content, especially after we provide context. As well as kind of, we feel like they kind of take at least mental notes that, okay, so if SpeakUp sends us this type of case that is not really mentioned in our policies, but we've read the context once, twice, 3 times, so now they have like something like kind of note that they know that this from Egypt or from this region is actually life-threatening and we should take it down, even if it's not explicitly stated in the policies. But sadly with Meta, I mean, you mentioned with Meta, it's honestly a fight, and every update they make to their policies is just slimming it down more and more. So when they ask us to add a specific line that in the policy that the content violates, we cannot find any because they removed all of them. So yeah, as I mentioned, there's no standard answer, but it varies.
Google will take like 6 months.
We actually did a petition to Google to for the removal of revenge porn on search engines, and some of the search engines actually gave us some kind of positive response, but we're still fighting.
Thank you. My name is Zuzana. I'm from Witness, and I co-lead an initiative called Deepfake Service Response Force when we assist with detection of potential deepfakes, and the things we work on are usually around elections or conflict, but we are looking for ways in which we could support the non-consensual internet imagery if AI generation is involved. And you mentioned one case, and I was wondering if you could share what's the role of the AI element in your reporting, whether you need to, when you say that this piece of content was AI generated, do you have to prove it, or is it visible enough because it's very poor deepfake, or is just only the fact that the nature of the content is that it's explicit, or if that's enough to violate the policies and the AI element is not relevant? That makes sense.
So honestly, for most of the cases that we receive, it's usually a very cheap version, so it's very obvious. And we actually now have, like, we added a category of violations for AI-generated images and videos, because sadly it is increasing. I mean, out of all the ways you could use AI. But yeah, so, but generally, if you could say that, for example, there's multiple violations in the same report, sometimes one of the violations kind of weighs heavier and is like, it takes priority. So that's also what we have to keep in mind when we're reporting a piece of content. So for example, impersonation is one of the hardest things to convince the platform to take down. But for example, if it's joined with this impersonation promoting sexual services or I don't know, defrauding people in some way or something like that. Can you? Okay, I think it's dead. Okay. So for example, in these cases, we wouldn't report it as impersonation or as the authentic identity and account integrity violation, but we would report it as fraud
And something to add, we actually we publish reports each month for the statistics of our helpline. It has like the type of violations that we received, how many reports from which countries, how much of the reported content was taken down by